for sure. That for sure.
Moderator.
Right, warm welcome everyone. It is a pleasure to have you today on this session. My name is Dr. Justin Chinoperekwe, and I will give a brief welcome remarks before handing over this particular program to our host, Mr. Mohammad Faisal Bariyaly. We are the Center for Organization Leadership and Development, and we facilitate the Certified Organization Leadership and Development Consultant Program And it is because of this particular program that we are hosting this guest session today to deliberate on issues pertinent to organization development and with a special focus on the public sector. We are humbled to be having Professor Jamieson once again and Dr. Christine to facilitate this particular conversation or guest lecture on organization development in the public and private sector. The field of organization development is fundamental to organizational effectiveness. And as the Center for Organization Leadership and Development, we are focused at advancing the OD field. We are focused at advancing the science, the theory, the practice, and the values of organization development, with a primary focus to facilitate organizational effectiveness. And following our last session with Professor Jamieson and Dr. Christine, the current candidates on the Certified Organization Leadership and Development Program requested for this particular session, primarily because most of the students on our current cohort are working in the public sector. And we are going to see briefly an introduction of some of the case studies that they are working on with the Ministry of Justice in Afghanistan and the Attorney General Office as well in Afghanistan. So our current cohort has a total of 12 students who are based in Afghanistan, in Botswana, in Zimbabwe, and in Kenya. I welcome you once again to this particular session, our Certified Organization Leadership and Development Consultant Program guest session, which is focused or premised on the principles and practices of organization development. Everything that we do as the Center for Organization Leadership and Development and the Organization Leadership and Development Network is primarily centered on the field of organization development. We are continuing to work on collaborations with international organizations in order to advance the field of OD in Africa and beyond. And we are humbled once again to be having Professor Jamieson and Dr. Christine. I think they are becoming a tag team on our COLD programs in terms of facilitating these sessions. We are so much humbled to have you once again. Our core values are global intelligence. We encourage our students, we encourage our members to have global intelligence and interact with people across continents. We facilitate inclusion of people, inclusion of ideas, inclusion of disciplines, because we believe these are the fundamental values of the OD field. We also emphasize ongoing personal and practitioner development, networking, and zest in designing and delivering OD activities. Our core motto is igniting insightful conversations in order to lead change, facilitate continuous improvement, and enhance or improve the human condition. So without taking much time, I will hand over this particular program to Mr. Mohammad Faisal Bariyaly, who is in Afghanistan and is a member of our current cohort of students. Over to you, Mr. Bariyaly.
Thank you so much, Dr. Justin, for your continuous inspiring helps and associations with different professionals and students all over the country. My video is off due to the lack of power and connection, so I will be only on the mic. I want to share my screen if possible, sir.
Sure, you can go ahead.
Honorable change agents, charismatic leaders, mentors, and coaches who inspire us, including our professional teammates and friends who joined us virtually. I wish you all a good time with blessings of health and safety. Our session focuses on practical organizational development interventions in both public and private sector reform and change. In today's environment, we live and work in diversity and change. Diversity to me is creativity, and I'm sure we have a taste of the diversity at the very moment with people of different culture, age, and ethnic group virtually joined for sharing knowledge from different corners of the world, aim to have a universal positive impact. You might have joined this session from different professional backgrounds, but I'm confident that you will definitely gain knowledge and be familiar with practical interventions commonly used on the field of OD for change, reform, and transition. Using the standard interventions will help us for better change and transformation. Welcome all. My name is Faisal Bariyaly, the host for today's program. I'll be briefly introduce myself to all. My name is Faisal. I have over 7 years of experience in the field of capacity development and organizational procurement. Interventions will help for better change. We and the team named as Eagle Eye Consultancy Firm work on 2 different case studies. I just wanted to brief the cases first, then we'll go to the introducing the distinguished guest lecturers, and we'll have the question and answer session after each presentation. One of our teammates, Mr. Hassan Tawakoli, is supposed to be here. If he is present, please pop so that we can have your case presented simultaneously after my. The first case that we worked with the help of OLDN was in one of the justice institution in Afghanistan. Due to confidentiality, I will not quote the name, but the case was on cultural change. On that being the reason, we quoted accepting responsibility plus professional behavior equals to ideal organizational culture. We, the team of 8 different professional background, met with the top management of this institution. The institution had their own views on the current situation. The case will focus on 2 main objectives. The first objective is understanding the differences between the existing situation and the desired situation. And the second one, suggesting methods to change the current situation. Now the left part shows the current situation, which was 3 main problems. The first one, unfavorable office setup and supplies. Second one, irresponsibility of the staff in managing office affairs and equipment. And the third one, lack of standards on setting up official documents and archiving. Now, the desired situation is the opposite of what we are expecting. Arranging office equipment as per the standards, encouraging employees to take responsibility on managing their procedures, and using standards for documentation and archiving. We made a lengthy presentation as a startup to the case and presented to the top management with depicting of the pictures so that they have the real taste of what is happening and what is the current situation and what we want to achieve, which included all the 3 aspects with the proposed interventions that we will be taking in the process for the change, but you can see one by one in the screen. But unfortunately, due to the recent changes in the top management of this institution with the presidential decree, the person in the top management engaged in this idea, who was leading this idea, is no more with the institution. His position along with his office staff is eliminated from the overall structure. So we are in an empty environment currently and waiting for the another loop to get back into the track. Now, the second case that we wanted to focus, and it was simultaneously a month after this case was started, we were requested to work on system building, on the capacity development department of the same institution, on using digital approaches while capacity development. Through this, we had a bottom-up approach. The first case, we went from top to bottom approach, which we faced lots of difficulties and problems. But in this case, we wanted to go from bottom to top approach, bottom-up approach, so that we may have a feasible way to reach the aims. Now, the concept for this changes have been prepared with details and focusing on three aspects. The first one is developing a training database system, which is not currently available in this department. This system will record all the training events, including the title, details, participant list, the impact of pre-post test differences, and so on. The second one is developing a digital library. And this library will include all the texts and videotaped training packages. And the third one is developing a training website through which the participants from different corners of the country will have to get login to the website and gain the same knowledge shared with the others, because Afghanistan is facing with the security obstacles, ignoring the fact that all the world is facing the COVID-19 pandemic, which is also an obstacle on reaching physically to every program. So the concept is being prepared in draft and submitted for review to the top management, and the top management will have their insight on it so that accordingly we may proceed. That's all about the two cases. And possibly if Hassan Tawakkoli is not present here, sir, I will go to introduce our distinguished guest lecturers, and accordingly we will hand over to them for their further insight.
Thank you, Mr. Faisal Bariyaly. I see Mr. Hassan is here. Just to give an overview, of the case studies, our approach to professional development is to work with real case studies. So all our learners have to work on a real case study, and the two case studies that Mr. Faisal has indicated are real case studies that they have been working on for the past 6 months. And Mr. Hassan will also present one case study that he's working on with a group of team. And I saw Ms. Tsitsi from Zimbabwe is here. She's also assisting on that case study. So it's just to give us an overview of the practical interventions that the learners are putting in place before we move into the actual guest lectures. Mr. Hassan, over to you. You have about 3 minutes only.
Thank you, Dr. Justin. Thank you for the team, and good evening for everybody. And thank you for giving me the floor to discuss my case study. And my case study was about the Ministry of Justice and Human Resource Reform. Let me share my screen first. Can everybody see my screen?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Mute.
Okay. My case study was is the OD practical intervention in Afghanistan Ministry of Justice, and Okay. Case study. Our case study is about the practical OD intervention in public sector. And as a team of MOJ 3 staff, we have selected to work with the Ministry of Justice Human Resource Department. As a change agent, we have some role and responsibility to work with the Ministry of Justice. And we have 3 distinguished roles to work with as a change agent, work to bring changes to the Ministry of Justice Human Resource Department. The first one was the consulting. We've given the consulting to each staff during their work, and also we're coaching and using the coaching and mentoring approach to help bring changes, and also researching. These are our roles as a change agent for the Ministry of Justice. Let me give you a background on the Ministry of Justice. Ministry of Justice Human Resource Directorate consists of 5 different departments: a structure or tashkil, recruitment, health and employee relation, HRMIS and performance appraisal department, and last one is training and capacity building department. Each department has their unique contribution to the MOJ Human Resource Department. For example, structure was forecasting new and required staff, and recruitment to get the right staff and for the right position and fill the vacant position. And all other department, they have their own, contribution to the HR department. Our case study kickoff. To review current status of the Human Resource Directorate, we have developed SWOT analysis. Me and Ms. Titi, we have developed the new form, 40 questions as a SWOT analysis questions. And these questions, these old questions comprises for each, strengths point, weakness point, and opportunity and threats of each department. Almost 40 questions have been developed as an inquiry and engagement process to involve each and every staff of the different departments in the process. The SWOT form has been handed over to each department head to distribute among their staff. After completing the form by each HR staff, they were collected, compiled, and assessed to get the root of the problem. Assessment. All information received was assessed and analyzed to get the root cause of the problems, constraints, and challenges they may face. We have identified almost 10 challenges they have been facing during the work, and they need to use the strengths to tackle those challenges. A matrix has been designed in Excel sheet in order to classify their challenges and propose way forward and activities to meet these challenges and overcome these problems. Analysis. Most of the problem is rooted in a lack of proper communication and coordination, lack of planning, organizing, and prioritizing their daily, weekly, and in general, their work. Lack of information, awareness in policy, rule, regulation, and compliance to them. Lack of commitment and loyalty to their vision, mission, mandate of the organization, and lack of teamwork and being individualism in the organization. What practical intervention have been used in order to tackle those problems or challenges? We've been using appreciative inquiry. Using and focusing to something is going well in the department, the total organization is appreciative inquiry. And for this, we have proposed team building and development initiative in order to tackle the problems of being individualism, or there's lack of team building or team development in the organization. Organization culture change, communication and coordination practices, diversity initiative, performance management and evaluation system. System thinking. Organizations combinations of system, and each system has interaction and impact to each other. No isolate system can be working properly and successfully. For this, we have spread the system thinking between the staff and also we have focused on the core values and the mission and bold the mission and vision of the organization. And action research. Action research is a process of problem-centered, client-centered, and action-centered. Doing research to find problem cause and assist client to find the solution by himself. And with this action research, we involve diagnostic, active learning, and problem finding and solving process. And we help the organization to themselves to find the solution for each problems. And we have, with these all interventions, we have identified the problems, and with the practical interventions, we find solution to each problems. That's all from my end. Any questions, if you may have?
Thank you, Mr. Hassan. For the sake of time, I will hand over to Mr. Bariyaly to introduce our guest speakers, and we proceed in context of the two case studies that has been presented. Mr. Bariyaly.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tawakoli, for your briefing. I have the honor to introduce our first guest lecturer. Dr. David holds a PhD as a professor, department chair, organizational learning and development, College of Education, Leadership and Counseling at the University of St. Thomas. He is also president of the Jamieson Consultancy Group and Corporation and a distinguishing visiting scholar in other OD programs. Dr. David has 40 years of experience consulting to organizations on leadership, change, strategy, design, and human resource issues. He has over 20 years of experience coaching executives in many organizations across many sectors during challenging situations and contexts and in transition to new, different, and higher levels of responsibility. Dr. David is the past national president of the American Society for Training and Development, now Associated for Talent Development 1984, past chapter president of ETD-LA, and past chair of Management Consultation Division, 1996, and Practical Team Committee, 2000 to 2003, of Academy of Management. He was a recipient of 2015 Distinguished Scholar Practitioner Career Achievement Award from the Academy of Management and the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Organization Development Network. He currently chairs the Organization Development Education Association. Dr. David is the co-author of Managing Workforce 2000, Gaining the Diversity Advantages, Josephus 1991, co-author of the Facilitators Field Book, 3rd edition, AMECOM 2012, co-author of Consultation for Organization Change, IAP 2010, and Consultation for Organization Change, Revisited 2016, and co-author of Handbook for Strategic HR, Best Practices in Organization Development for the OD Network, AMECOM 2012. In addition, he has published 16 chapters and numerous articles in journals and newsletters. He serves as editor of Seasoning and OD Network online journal, associate editor for the Reflection of Experience section of the Journal of Management Inquiry, and on the editorial board for Journal of Applied Behavioral Science, Journal of Organization Change Management, and Organization Development Practitioner. We warmly welcome you, sir, and thank for your time and insightful presentation that you will present in the session. I would like to also introduce our second guest lecturer, Honorable Ma'am. Dr. Christine is the Vice Chancellor of UNICAF University in Zambia. Dr. Christine has an excellent record in academic and institutional leadership, having served as Vice Chancellor in another academic institution before her move to UNICAF University in Zambia. She is an ardent educationalist and an experienced HR professional and consultant. Dr. Christine earned her doctorate from the University of Huddersfield in the United Kingdom and has made significant impact as a professional in higher education, winning the prestige award of Africa's most influential women in business and government by CEO Global in the educational category as regional winner and country winner in 2017, 18, and 19. We welcome you, ma'am, and thanks for your time. And for the participants, I would like to say that during the presentation, you will have the opportunity to pose any question in the chat box so that we will have a question and answer session after the end of each presentation by our distinguished lecturers. I hand over to Dr. David. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. With such a nice introduction, I always wish that my mother was still alive to realize that I did turn out okay. But it's nice to hear that. So thank you so much, sir. I want to try to get my screen shared now, and yes, okay. And I wanted to just say when I received this introduction, I began to think about two things in particular that I wanted to kind of highlight today. One of them is how much OD is not really different across industries and sectors and types of organization. And yet, over my years in the field, what I've heard over and over and over again is, oh, everything's different when you're in public sector, or it all has to be different when you're in private sector or nonprofit. And so I've been thinking a bit about what I wanted to share today, and my message is that there is more ways for OD to be used in the same ways than there is in OD being different. There are differences, and I will say a few words about that, across sectors for sure, and across different types of industries even, and different countries in terms of businesses and organizations in different countries. But in some ways that doesn't change the basics and the core of OD and how we ought to do our work with the people that we're trying to help. So that was kind of the main message today. And secondly, I want to tell you how pleased I am to support people who are studying and learning more about OD and finding ways to apply this in their own world and in their own context.
Sorry, Dave, could you maximize your screen?
Yeah. Let me see where I can do that. I think it's being covered up. Yeah, here we go. Okay. Slideshow from the beginning. Yep, that's better.
Yes, perfect.
Definitely, thank you. Yeah. And that may make it able for me to make this slide change. It's interesting how often that is a problem. I get on the first slide and you're trying to change to the second one and it isn't changing. And I don't see another way to do it. Usually it's just on this, on my, darn it. Why is this not changing? There doesn't seem,
You can minimize them, it's fine.
huh?
You can minimize the screen then, it's okay. Yeah, you can use those arrows, I think.
Well, it
Bottom
shouldn't,
left.
yeah, I know, but it shouldn't make that much of a
Yeah.
difference, but, there we go. Perfect.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So there's three things that I want to spend a little time on this morning, or this evening for you. OD, the same and different. I'll talk just a brief bit about that and what my experience has been with that. A few core basics that we always need to include. I like to highlight these things because even the field of OD has has grown very diverse and very fragmented, and it's hard to understand what is the core and what do we have to pay attention to. And then some examples, which I think many of you will know better than I will because you're working in the public sector, but I can share a couple different things from the public sector, and how the work there for me was no different than working with other groups of people who were inside organizations trying to meet a mission. So so OD, same and different. So I've learned over the time period that so many people think that OD needs to be different when we're in different sectors and different industries. And a lot of times what I've found is people are focusing more on what's different about the context and about the types of tasks people are doing. But that does not necessarily change that much about how we need to be doing OD. What is different is the type of organization, meaning we need to understand any system that we work with, meaning we don't have to be expert at it, but we need to work jointly with leaders in organizations if we're trying to improve their effectiveness and build more and build more healthy workplaces. So we do have to understand what they do and how the environment and the nature of their work gets influenced by different things that are happening around the world. So their purpose, their mission, and their tasks are important for us to know so that we can appropriately work with leaders. Because if we came only from banking and we tried to work with a manufacturing company, for example, we would not know the language and we would not understand how they're organized and how the work flows through a manufacturing organization. So while OD can be practiced in the same way, no matter what kind of organization they are, it does always help us to understand things about the organization without being as expert as the people who live in that organization and the ones who lead it. People and technologies are combined in almost every type of organization system there is. And it makes very little difference then what the sector or industry happens to be, because there's still people and technologies attempting to work jointly within an organization, trying to achieve whatever that organization's mission and purpose is. Okay. So the second thing we need to talk about is then what does provide core basics about OD, and what is it that we need to include no matter what type of organization we're walking into. And this was particularly true early in my career. I had been working with private sector organizations, and my partner and I at the time in a consulting business began making more inroads into local government, into working with cities and working with counties in the United States. And so as we began to do that, of course, we both discovered things that were different and things that they talked about and things that were on their agendas. But when it came to actually helping them improve their effectiveness and become a more high performing organization, everything that we already knew about OD was really helpful and beneficial to them. And in some cases, they had not experienced much of that. And this was a number of years ago, but they had not experienced a bunch of that. And so once we could understand what their board and what their top leaders were concerned about and what their issues were, the rest of it was how did we look at the design of the organization, the relationships of people who needed to work together, and how did we, and then how they began to function better as work had to move from department to department, or how the actual system itself, that was in that case a government organization, would work. So I'm going to talk about these 8 pieces just briefly, so that we begin to see some ideas about what I think is core and basic. So in systems thinking, one of the things we have to remember is every system forms for a purpose. And so when we have an organization, which we know is a system, it's built as a system, they need to have a clear purpose. So there are a lot of systems that are ineffective and dysfunctional, partly because people inside of it are actually pursuing different purposes rather than a common purpose. So the system needs a purpose. The system is always made up of parts and wholes, and we have to understand when we're working with parts, those parts are being influenced by interactions across many other parts. And this is just basically what systems theory is about. And it's all about the interactions and interdependencies among parts that make up a whole. So when we see the results at the level of the whole, we do not fully understand all the interactions of parts that produce that. So remember that, because in today's world, when the outside world, the environmental world, has accelerated in its change and has accelerated in its complexity, that makes it even harder to know how all the interdependencies create the final results that we see. So interdependency simply means 2 parts that affect each other and that have some dependency on each other in terms of how they function. Now, a simple way to think about that is Department A and Department B in any organization. What A does sometimes really helps or hinders what B does. That's one example of how an interdependency works. And the levels of complexity in the environment and also inside has now grown a lot. And so we now have to think of our systems not in simple systems theory terms, but in more complex system theory terms, meaning we have to understand that a lot of the interactions will produce emergent results. They'll produce emergent elements. They'll produce emergent behaviors. And so we have to pay closer attention to that than we used to even 20 years ago, when the world was a little slower and a little more stable. So we have to think now in systems thinking about what can be planned. Doesn't mean we can't plan some things, but we're not going to be able to build a plan and expect everything to turn out the way we anticipate it, because there will be emergent reactions along the way. And so that's very important about systems theory. And when we study systems theory, we try to study dynamics and patterns. What patterns seem to get formed in this organization? What are the dynamics, the things that drive changes inside this organization in a natural way? So systems thinking is one very critical thing that is core to OD work, and we don't want to lose it no matter what type of organization we're in. The second piece is stakeholder theory. A guy named Edward Freeman has done some of the best work on stakeholder theory, and you can find it in one or two or maybe three books that he's done, I think. But stakeholder theory is about inside and outside the organization. It means who has a stake in what we do and how we do it. And the key to stakeholder theory that Edward Freeman put forward is about how we create value for all stakeholders. Now, I think we all know in the history of organizations, we have not created value for all the stakeholders. There are stakeholders that are privileged, and there are stakeholders that aren't as privileged. There are people who are included, and there are people who are excluded. So what stakeholder theory brings to OD is the importance of understanding whatever the organization is. Let's say it's a public sector organization or it's a private sector organization. Those two organizations have different sets of stakeholders, and they have different stakeholders that have the most power to affect the organization. So in the public sector, there are citizens and there are people in leadership roles that are voted in. In private organizations, there are people who are selected or appointed into leadership. So their constituent base is actually very different. So we have to understand every organization as a stakeholder map. And when we do that in OD work, it allows us to move to what are some of the other basics. And one of the big ones is inclusion and participation. OD from the start was always focused on who needs to be included and how do we engage them in a way that they participate. So we have to think across roles, across levels, inside and out, and also across any other differences, meaning whenever there are differences, we tend to create a hierarchy or a caste system when there are differences. And so we want to think of inclusion as meaning across differences as well as across roles and across levels and across different stakeholders who are inside and out. That's where the inclusion piece comes in. And the participation piece comes in because we need the knowledge, the experience, the perspectives, and the voices of all the stakeholders and all the people who have different data about how well the organization is doing or how poorly the organization is doing. So we need that information. And for years, management theory has tried to create the understanding that the people at the top have all the experience and knowledge needed to make good decisions. With the accelerated change in our world, that's no longer probably true. So now we need knowledge, experience, and perspectives that come from people who are sitting at different levels in the organization, people who are in touch with the customers, people who work inside the operation somewheres and don't deal with customers. They all have different data that's important. When we think about our goal is organization effectiveness and a healthy workplace. So those two things are our goals. We need different data. And then the last piece is engagement and psychological safety are critical if we're going to have any real participation. You can pretend you're participating when you have a lot of people speak and give input and it's all ignored. That is not real participation. Real participation requires people to be engaged, meaning they care about it and they believe and they can trust that you want to hear what they have to say. And then psychological safety means people don't feel like there's going to be consequences if they raise a different point of view, that they have some freedom to speak and that people are listening and trying to understand each other. So that's where inclusion and participation have been core and basic, I believe, almost from the very, very beginning of OD. OD has always been data-based, and I wanted to say that having some data is better than having none. So when I run into a leadership team who think they think they know it all that they need, and they're not interested in hearing anything or collecting any data or even sampling any data from other parts of the organization, I find that to be a big red flag, and we wonder about what that really means. How much are they trying to control the narrative and the understanding of what's going on in the organization? So database simply means that when we bring data forward, we have the chance for everybody to learn something different. When everybody thinks they know everything they need to know, that's almost always a mistake in today's world, because today's world, there's a lot of things that are new, that are unknown, and that are happening very fast. And we need to add a little bit of a learning perspective to almost everything we do and not keep making assumptions that if I make decision A, this is the result we're going to get, because I made decision A before and we always got that result. That's not likely to continue happening. So when we're getting data, we can try to get it representatively. We can do some kind of sample. We can get it from everybody if our organization is not that big. But it all depends on size and difficulty and timing. We can't spend our life collecting data, but we also can't do good OD work that isn't in some way data-based. We also have to pay attention to more than just numbers. So many people think the whole world is described by measurement and numbers. The problem is there are a lot of very, very important variables in how well an organization is functioning that don't have numbers attached to it. Things like people's commitment and even people's engagement, which we now are measuring quite a bit. But engagement is a behavioral variable. So the question is not what the numbers say, whether our engagement is a 5 or an 8. It's our people jumping in and volunteering and participating when needed, and are they in fact working towards the mission and committed to it. Those are very important aspects, and that data, by the way, is often not in numbers, but it's more of a qualitative data, and it's more how it shows up in behavior that's important. So we always have to ask this question: what's important to know in order for us to take action or make changes? What do we need to know first? And that's the only reason why data-based is such a core piece. Partnering is our job. Our job as change agents is to partner with leaders. If you are a leader, then your job is to find a way to partner with people who can be change agents, meaning the expertise of the leader and the expertise of a change agent need to come together, and neither one of those always has both of those expertises. So leaders and change agents. So in our work, we have to have the right relationship. And the years that I spent full-time in practice in the field taught me between good relationships with leaders and not so good relationships with leaders had made all the difference in how the rest of the work occurred. Our relationships need to be open, trusting, and respectful, meaning when we are together, I like to use the word even equal. In other words, in partnerships, people tend to be equal with each other, but it shows up as being open in sharing, it shows up being trusting of each other, and it shows up in being respectful of each other. So you can't be an effective change partner if the leader treats you like a vendor or like somebody who takes their orders. That's not the right relationship for change. So leaders do have different responsibilities. They're responsible for the outcomes of the organization. They have to make critical decisions. They have to make decisions about how resources are used. Change agents, however, provide help with a different expertise. If we bring change knowledge and we bring OD principles to work jointly with a leader, we can help make the change work better than just the way they may wish to do it. And so the nature of partnerships is what makes it work. And I think it's very interesting. I've been in partnerships. I've had 2 partnerships as businesses, and one worked really well and one didn't work really well. So I learned a lot about partnerships. And if you just study partnerships, it's a little bit like studying marriage in a way, because you have to find the right balance between the value and contributions and expertise of each other so that together you make a whole. And so the concept of partnering, I think, is a critical piece of how we can make OD work well. It's important to understand change, and the things that have made the most sense to me about change is that it is cyclical and that change always has phases. And so we need to remember that change is always a process. And I have been in many organizations where people think change is an event, or change is a workshop, or change is a or change is a policy being initiated and put out throughout the organization. On day 1 and probably day 100, that doesn't change a lot of people's behavior. And change is usually behavioral in the end. So even when we reorganize the structure, our intention is to get some different behaviors occurring. And so we have to remember that there's a process. And the process means that it will go through different phases. For the individual, it will go through possibly a resistance phase before there's a commitment phase. And for the whole organization, it'll have to go through some form of readiness before people will actually try and experiment doing different things. Action research, which is which was one of Kurt Lewin's major contributions, is a fascinating way to think about this. because action research is iterative and cyclical process in which people collect data, they make sense of the data, and they choose an action to take. Then they learn what happens from that action, and they use the new data to consider the next actions. And that becomes cycle 2. So action research has always been described that way. I wouldn't say it's being practiced that way all the time. But what's fascinating about it is that it recognizes a cycle and a process in change. And as you'll see, I think in the next one or two things I want to say is it integrates learning. That is, learning becomes very important in all changes. And I think it's fascinating that over the years, even when I was studying OD, there wasn't a lot of emphasis on how important learning theory is in change. But when you think about change, it means we're going to go from doing something one way to doing something another way. And we should respect the thought that learning is necessary. And the managers and the leaders have to also not resist the fact that they can learn more too. And in today's world, my God, after the last 10 years of rapid change, I think everybody's going to have to learn some new things. And then the system changes and dynamically reacts. That is, it does reactions in ways that are often unpredictable. But the system does change anytime there's a disruption, an intervention, or an action, meaning when something different is done, that system will change or dynamically react. So, so because of that, that is why we have to think of change in a process way, and how it will move through stages. And the more we understand those changes, the more we're not surprised when something we wanted to have happen doesn't happen immediately. So for leaders and change agents, I think it's important to remember that we need to keep our eyes on what and how. Every organization is challenged to determine what are they going to do and how are they going to do it. And in the world of stability 30 years ago, you could decide that once and probably continue it for quite a number of years or decades. Now we have to think about that even more often. So leaders and change agents have to stay focused on what the organization needs to do and how that should be done. The reason what and how are both important is because what gets at the content and how gets at the process. And forever we have talked about content and process, and everybody said OD works on the process, because when OD started, people were only making decisions about the content. What are we going to do? What's the best thing to do? What's our strategy? What's our goal? What got fouled up a lot was how it got done and how it worked inside the organization. So the process focus was very important in the founding of OD, and a lot of OD principles and practices deal well with how to make processes work better. But I want to suggest today that OD people and leaders need to both care about the what's and the how's, because the world we're living in is driving changes in both the what and the how. And what takes data and expertise so we can decide what we're going to do. The how involves the best ways we can create success, the desired outcome, and processes to help change behaviors, mindsets, and operating systems. Process is critical in our organization operations, and process is also critical in how we do any change. And finally, we use behavioral and organizational sciences. Behavioral sciences help us understand human beings, and that is half, if not more, of what every organization is full of. And it helps us understand organization behavior, and it certainly helps us understand change and how hard change is and what people go through when they change, and all those nice models and theories that we have in OD that help to explain that. But the organization sciences help us to understand organization design, operations, work systems and processes, and how to use technology in work, the socio-technical aspects of organizations. So we need to use both of these if we're going to help build effective and healthy organizations. Because we need organizations that can get the job done, and we need organizations that don't wear people down to nothing in the process. We need a healthy workplace where people can be comfortable at work, where people don't have to be discriminated at work, where people can do their best work, and that also has to perform well against the goals. So we can use both sets of sciences to help us, and I've always said OD needs both, even though there are OD programs that only teach us more about the behavioral sciences. So, as I said, you probably have much more experience working in public sector than I do, but across my career, I've worked probably 50% in private sector organizations, probably 30% in public sector, and maybe 20 in the nonprofit world. Because when I started out in consulting, I said to myself, I do not want to specialize in a sector or an industry. I want to practice OD across all kinds of organizations. Two areas that I spent a lot of time in was law enforcement and public education. And for the most part, I'll just share just a couple highlights and then let any questions help to focus it, or any of your own examples. In law enforcement, one of the things that I found early on was in working with, in our country, we have chiefs of police and we have sheriffs, and they pretty much run most of the law enforcement departments at the local level. And what I found a lot of them needing is getting their leadership teams organized and functioning more as a leadership team. And what that meant was, authority is very important in law enforcement, and it's semi-military in the way they think. So all these other senior leaders, they were called captains or they were called lieutenants, and they would be with the top person, but they wouldn't speak up and they wouldn't bring their ideas forward. They wouldn't use their particular data to change what was going on. And what a lot of sheriffs and chiefs that I met were interested in is they wanted a more equal leadership team, and they wanted the expertise of the other people. So you go back to all the team development work in OD, it wasn't any different for them. It's about roles, it's about psychological safety, it's about participation by everyone on that team, because that's why they're on the team. And so there was quite a bit of work on teams when I started working with law enforcement. The second
we have
thing,
2 minutes to go. 2 minutes to go. Sir.
Okay. Well, and then let me tell you about public education then, because that started at the team level as well. Schools had principals, and then they had 2 or 3 other roles, usually vice principals and and heads of counseling and stuff like that. And so doing some of the team building work at the school level was important. And as that began to be more successful, people at the district and state levels would look at that and say that they could actually function better too if they would increase the value and the interaction patterns that were occurring at their senior teams. So those are places, for example, that that I've seen some of that happen. And I'll stop there with just the main message that I was saying, that we do OD in the same ways, whether it's public sector, private, or nonprofit. And as the change agent, what I often had to do was I had to learn what was different about the context they had, not anything that was different about OD. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. It was really insightful and amazing. Not only to me and to the participants, and I see the comments here that your presentation was really a present, a precious gift, and it solved the problems and the challenges within our minds, so that we will focus more on what really OD is, and
Yes.
exactly the changes gonna happen if we don't change the government institution, whether it's private or public institution. If the change is not gonna happen, then we will collapse sooner or later with failure. So change and organization development is the vital blood in every organization. So
Yeah.
we will have certain questions. If the participants are having questions, they can raise their hand or they can have it in the chat box, or Dr. David will have his insightful answers to your imposed question.
I don't know how insightful. Dr. Christine will pick up on the insightful stuff.
So I will have a
Yes.
question meanwhile, sir, if possible.
Yes, as we wait for questions, maybe we have about 3 minutes. We have Dr.
Yes, sir.
Cornell. She has done consulting work in the public sector. I would ask her to give a word in maybe 1 minute. We have Dr. Dotun, was also working with the British Council and other organizations. Maybe 1 minute will do. And Dr. Violet is in quality assurance in the higher education sector. Maybe also you can have a minute just to put things in context. And anyone else, I saw a hand from Dr. Nuri. You can also share some insights. Dr. Cornell. You're muted.
Mute, yeah.
There, here we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Sorry, I had to switch devices here because the one's battery is running out. But thank you very much for the invite to start off with, and thank you for asking me to participate. Can I please just congratulate and say thank you for the insights that have been shared. You know, sometimes I feel very sad that I wasn't part of this fraternity long ago already, because every time I attend one of these sessions, I just gulp up a wealth of knowledge. So thank you for sharing experiences. And I must agree definitely with Professor Jamieson in the sense of, I've also worked in the private sector and the public sector, and it ranges from the military right through to mining to regulatory environment. And I must agree that whether you're working in private or public sector, the context and the content of the organization is what determines the OD, not where you are in terms of whether it's private and public or public. So I fully agree with that. And I'm also a big systems theory fan, if I can call it that. So because, you know, the whole works according to the parts. So if you don't give attention to all the parts, you're going to miss out. And if you don't consider asking advice from the lowest level staff member, who is most probably experiencing things completely different than the executives are, you will never have full participation because you won't understand everything that's happening in the organization. So from my side, thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the next presentations, but yeah, that's my 1 minute full of sharing. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Datun.
Thank you. So I think I actually came here as a student. I didn't come here as a contributor because every single word drop here is so significant and so important. So, but what that is very outstanding to me as part of what Professor have said is number one, as we deepen more in the role of OD, we see more. So OD has a lot of boundaryless components, and it keeps evolving as we engage in roles and responsibilities and assignments.
Yeah.
And I come to realize I have been having this mental challenge, but now I think I'm not clear. Also, I've been able to clarify my worry. I find myself sometimes consulting for 2-3 organizations in the same industry. In fact, having almost the same similar challenge. But I feel that even when I try to apply almost the same principles, they don't work. Why? Because the peculiarities of the internal structure, the people differences dictate how models we apply in that organization. So I think Professor Jamieson has been able to clarify this my worry over a long period of time. I think I'm so blessed. Thank you so much.
Yes. Well, and that makes perfect sense, because if you do work in the same industry, two things will happen. One is you will know their common issues, and so many of the ways you intervene might be similar, but the people are still different in each organization.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Madam Maureen after Madam Violet, Dr. Violet, Maureen, and then I think if anyone wants to contribute, please do raise your hand so that we do justice to all contributions. Dr. Violet.
Thank you, Dr. Justin. You are always on point for getting us good and dedicated personnel and facilitators. This is excellent as usual. Yeah, well done, and the team behind you. I also want to thank the professor. My statement in the first instance is to just support again what he has said, that the educated of the 21st century are those who are able to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Because what he is saying is we are in a dynamic and fast changing world. And so if you continue to hold on to what you did last time and the way you tackled it, you will miss everything. And then the other thing which I also wanted to say is in higher and tertiary education, with the 4th industrial revolution and the outbreak of COVID-19, I told the higher education institution leaders and all the personnel to say, you need to shape up or ship out. And this goes to say the behavior, the individual culture, the organizational culture, and the national culture have a lot to do with change management and the way people accept change. And so if those who are fast changing are taking on board what is coming, they are always ahead of the situation and they are the major beneficiaries. Once more, Prof, there's no time, but I just want to thank you and thank you, Dr. Justin. Thank you, everybody who has joined the session. It's wonderful. I thank you.
Thank you. Madam Maureen, you have 1 minute so that we don't eat Dr. Christine's time. Maureen.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, fine. Good afternoon, everyone. And I want to thank the leadership of OLDS and the professor. This conversation is a very, very key one. And in fact, I personally found it invaluable because I have listened to a professor. I have picked some very, very important keywords in this presentation, and it is really, really going to help some of us that are just coming in into the practice of organizational development. I looked at when he says that every organization is a stakeholder map. And that statement bounced back seriously to me because from the environment, from my environment, from the sector I operate in, we had a lot of stakeholders. We have a very complex business environment. Mm-hmm. We have a very divergent units of operations in the industry. And it has been very, very difficult to get people to unite and see how they can harness the large size of our industry, of the components of our industry, and find a point where we could actually work as stakeholders that have some level of interdependence that determines our success and determines our failure collectively in the industry. I don't know if I still have 1 minute. I just wanted to cite an example. I just came out from a meeting of an automotive after sales services. There was a discussion this afternoon on their survivability for 2021. And one of the highlights in the discussion is that the inability of the operators in the industry to agree to a particular terms has made it impossible for the government to actually be serious on developing and delivering policies that can attract investors into the industry. Because the manufacturers in the industry, by the way, I'm talking about automobile industry, automobile and automotive industry. That is where the prime business that my company is running. The manufacturers of automobile and automotives want a different policy. And the importers of fairly used vehicles and components they're also coming from a different direction. And I want to believe that if we all understand what development of the automobile industry is and what it entails, there is need for us to have an agreement where we will find a place where every stakeholder will agree and be able to relate in such a way that we will survive. Because as it is now, the manufacturers are not going to survive and the importers are not going to survive with the current policy that the government has just signed into law. None of us are going to survive. And that is the situation where we find ourselves. So OD is a very important discipline to me, particularly because there is a lot of chaos and disagreement in the place where I operate. Thank you very much. I find that this very, very relevant, and I believe is going to drive my own plans in the industry.
That's very nice.
Thank you so much. Prof. Dev, anything you want to say before Mr. Bariyaly takes on?
No.
Okay, Bariyaly.
I have one question, sir. We are dealing with a very complex environment, especially in the government organizations. When I say complex environment, it means that the systems are not really systems that are working, that people are having different ideas and different aims. The organizational strategy and aims are one thing, and on the reality, they are working for their personal gains. And unfortunately, we have been facing the problems of getting engaged with the top management to discuss the real needs. They show ego, they think that they are very superior from the others. Yeah. And these, in such kind of environment, which I shall say, unfortunately, that corruption is also a big obstacles. How a person like I may call ourselves the freshers to the OD field, will face such kind of people, system, thoughts, and processes. How can we change? How can we initiate change to be someone different, to be a change agent, to be someone who shines the future of the country? Thank you so much, sir.
Well, just one comment to that, because I understand what you're saying is superiority and ego and leadership resistance are three of the areas that we have the most difficulty breaking through. And so one of the things that I think is one of the more valuable ways to do it is, one, first we work on building our own relationships with leaders, with individually. It doesn't have to be all of them, doesn't have to be the top one, but it has to be some leaders where we build a stronger relationship so that what we say can be seen credibly. That's one issue. The other issue is data speaks louder than any of our voices. If you can get any kind of data that you can bring in front of leaders that at least challenges their assumptions, there's a chance then to be able to be a partner with them and say, we can help. We know how to bring about change. If you're interested in changing something, we can help you. So you have to get to that stage though. Yes.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. I guess there is no questions, but appreciations to you. We will end with your inspiring talk, and we will hand over the platform to Dr. Christine. We welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Allow me to share the presentation. You can see the screen.
Yes, yes.
Let me just okay. Is that better? I hope I can find the the pointers. Okay. So may I begin by saying thank you to Professor, and it's always a privilege to do one of these presentations, especially after Professor has done his presentation. As a guru, I love to just sit and listen to him and continue to learn. Learning doesn't end. It is something that needs to continue. I wanted to begin by giving examples from my experiences as part of my introduction. I have served in the public sector. I think as a secondary school teacher, I was in the Ministry of Education, and I learned quite a lot of things from that sector. One of the things that I wanted to give an example of is I remember being posted to a new secondary school, and I arrived at the same time with the new head teacher. And so sitting in a staff meeting, we were waiting for the new head teacher to come in. I didn't know everybody that was seated around in that staff room. And so the new head teacher walked in and he had piles and piles of papers. And he started to give papers out. And he did it on his own. So he began going around and dishing out the different papers that he had. And whilst he was doing that, I think the incumbent members of staff began reading through what he was actually preempting. He was coming about with the different changes that he was going to implement as the new head teacher. And I began hearing one of the members of staff rising up and saying, "You think you can change this school? You cannot change this school. You better start off. This is the last day you are going to be in this school." And he didn't answer him. So he kept on giving out these papers. And this guy kept on ranting and telling him he's going to fail, that a number of head teachers had been to that secondary school and they had failed. And if he wanted, he could go to the Ministry of Education at the headquarters and tell them that the teachers at this particular secondary school had rejected him. And there was only one person speaking. And so what happened, I have never forgotten. And that is why I'm giving an example of this experience, because the head teacher, the new head teacher, dished out his last papers. went back to his chair. Instead of sitting down, he began rolling down his sleeves, rolling up his sleeves, and walked over and almost dived at this teacher who was ranting. And you can imagine what happened. That head teacher only lasted in that secondary school, I think only about 3 months. Nothing happened. And that secondary school remained one of the most difficult secondary schools in the district. And I wanted to give an example in the private sector. I became dean of this private university. I'm not going to name them. And the owners of the university were foreigners. But it was a good university. And I found my place there, and I was very happy. I was the first dean of the Faculty of Education. And so I got to meet the wife of the vice chancellor, who was also a major shareholder of the university. And she walked into my office and told me, we have an open door policy in this university, so don't close your door. So I looked at her and I thought, wow, I don't think an open door policy means leaving the door wide open. I think it is more than that. So she looked at me and said, this university is our university. It's not your university, so it's better you listen to what I'm saying. So I said, anyway, the concept of open door, I think is totally different from what you think open door policy is. So she looked at my table and said, we are a paperless organization here. And so I thought, oh, wow. So she gave me examples of what they were doing. They said they had a key, a kind of a policy that they had put in place where you only keep one pen on the table, one pencil, and probably the only file that you are working on, and a number of other things. And so I found it really difficult to fit in because of that. And I am very difficult. If I know that what is happening is not going to bring any development, I tend to become very difficult. And so they destroyed a lot of paper. A lot of paper was destroyed, and most of the paper had a lot of important information. And unfortunately, in about 2 months' time, the Zambia Revenue Authority visited the university. And you can imagine what happened, because all the paper that had been destroyed included important information that ZRA, which is the Zambia Revenue Department, was looking for, was all gone, and nothing had been preserved. And the university was charged a lot of money. For almost 2 years, members of staff salaries were never increased because we were told money is being paid to the Revenue Authority. And that affected the development of the organizations. So you see, these are two institutions. You've got a public one and a private one. A private one which is being run by a family. And I think there's issues to do with nepotism also, I think from what I got also from Dr. Justin. But I'll give you, I think as we move on, I'll give you some of the other experiences that I've had as a consultant as well. And I think some of them have been well explained by a professor. And so as I was thinking exactly of how and what I'm supposed to be saying, I came up, I think I was reading through, and I read through something that was very interesting, and that is a concept of dormant spores. And I'm sure those that are in the science profession will agree with me that when you're talking about dormant spores, you are talking about the end product of spore-forming bacteria, which are like Bacillus or Clostridium. So these bacteria, when they are in an unfavorable growing state, they, as much as possible, try to find ways and means of survival, and then they develop spores around them. These spores can actually be dormant, tough, and non-productive. Now, when I read through that whole concept, it was quite something that was lengthy. Somehow I began to sense from my experiences that, you know, there are a lot of similarities with members of staff, and that is inclusive leaders, of how sometimes we become dormant spores. We are like bacteria that develop these spores around us and begin to make change something that is very, very difficult. And so the concept is that I'm using dormant spores. I'm using it to explain the state of affairs that some people or organizations may actually transform into due to change. Now, the transformation is not for better. Remember what Professor has said, that change has to do with learning. When there is no change, there is no learning, because we decide to remain dormant, we decide to remain the same people. And so this is my explanation there, that you have this dormant staff. And remember, the dormant staff there is inclusive of the leader. It's not only the change agents. I think Professor has done quite well there by explaining that the leader is supposed to be in agreement with the change agents. The change agent would also be the members of staff. They are the ones that are going to be at the grassroots. So there must be that alignment and that agreement, that continuous communication. But now, so if we have these dormant staff, remember I've said that the dormant spores tend to be dormant, tough, and non-reproductive, meaning if you read at the bottom there, they are inactive, inoperative, unable to engage in any active, physically, emotionally, mentally tasks or activities, because they have become dormant. They have transformed themselves into these spores that they would rather watch and see what is going on. And that makes things really, really difficult. And being tough there, you find that some people think that they are tough when, like the example that I gave, this man stands up and begins to speak on behalf of everybody and saying, nothing is going to happen here. And the others were thinking, he's very tough. Look at the way he's standing up to this new head teacher. But he was not tough. What actually he was demonstrating is a sign of weakness. There's fear, there's uncertainty. As he read through the plan that the head teacher had, he realized that a lot of changes will have to take place. And yes, the head teacher had his own errors because nobody knew what he was going to do. I think there must have been engagement, and I think Professor has explained that quite very well. So strong enough to withstand unfavorable conditions, impossible to get through. Such kind of individuals are impossible to get through. Even understand, we begin to fail to understand. I think if you've gone through the theory of Lewin, you understand how Lewin explains the stages of change. And then non-reproductive, this is why there's literally nothing you can get out of them. No development that you do can actually change these people, because they have actually encased themselves around these spores. So you can send them for staff development meetings. That will not happen. They'll come back the same people, because it is something that has to do with the mentality. It is something that has to do with the change, the culture. It is something that has to do with their mindset. So we need to get to them so that they understand what this whole change is all about. So issues of insecurity there, the fear of the unknown, uncertainty, like I have indicated, and that could also be as a result of weakness. And moving on, I'm saying that such stuff would be so difficult to stimulate and motivate. I think something that I've already indicated to that effect. So stuff can actually drain life off the leaders and the managers. And you see, leaders who might be wanting to bring about this change, if not much has been done in terms of ensuring that everybody, or at least the majority of the change agents, have been brought to the same platform. If that has not been done, it becomes quite draining for the leader as well, because no matter how much you say, nothing begins to work. And that is why you end up with the head teacher who begins to fail to think. And the last thing that he does is to engage in a fight with the members of staff. So change is actually something that is very important. And I'm sure Professor has already talked to us about system thinking, because as I read through the concept that I'm talking about, it is noted that spores can rapidly spread around the whole body, causing systemic disease. Massive tissue can also be destroyed. And at the end of it all, death can actually occur. And some organizations have actually died, especially the private institutions. And sometimes even some of the departments in the public sector, you find that they just end up removing completely because there has been a systemic disease. Now, this kind of a disease affects the whole entire organization. We might say, all right, even if everybody, maybe 90% of the members of staff are in agreement and are on board, and we leave out one person, I think we would be making a mistake because that one person can actually begin to destroy the others. So it's better that we try as much as possible to bring everybody on board because there's a system in place that needs to be protected. There's a system in place that needs to be developed. There's a system in place that needs to be checked so that what we want to happen, like Professor has indicated, there is the how and there is the what. The process itself runs smoothly. Otherwise, the dormant spores might begin to destroy the whole organization. So individuals who see no need for change can cause systemic diseases, which would destroy the systems in the organizations, the structures in the organization, the fellow staff, and leadership also can easily be destroyed. Now, this is not anything new to any organization development student. When we talk about the new management change that goes on in almost every organization where change is taking place. And this came about because there were issues to do with decentralization. The central system or the federal system, the whole aspect of bringing in decentralization, privatization, and others, that came about due to the new management change. Now, I was looking at issues of benchmarking, like in the private sector, the management processes. Then there are issues to do with devolution of management control, improved reporting and monitoring systems. The preferences for private ownerships, contestable, and then you move on to the output measurement and performance targets, and then the emphasis on efficiency. These are elements of the new management change. Now, I thought I should bring the element of decentralization, which I think is something that has already been covered. Dr. Justin is actually brilliant at that. So when you're looking at decentralization, I want to look at the three processes there, which is the deconcentration, devolution, and the federation, which is the central decision-making place. Then you've got the privatization. Zambia is one country that has gone through the process of privatization. The whole issue of decentralization is an aspect that was called a dream, I think, in Zambia. I think since independence, we have talked about decentralization, and it has gone on and on. I've put some years at the end. You'll be able to see how that we have moved on in terms of trying to decentralize, especially the public sector. But I can tell you that from practice, as a country, we haven't done so well. In fact, the right way would be to say we have failed. It's just rhetoric. There's too much talking. There are too many meetings that have taken place, but when it comes to the actual implementation process, not much of the decentralization has happened. In certain cases where people have been informed, yes, there is a decentralization process, so people are not supposed to move from their district to come to the headquarters, you still find queues at the headquarters because people probably do not have the answers at the district level, which could be as a result of a number of processes or stages which would not have been put in place to enable the implementation of decentralization to take place. So I'm sure you would have by now read what is under devolution, deconcentration, and federation. But the last part of it, I'm saying devolving of power to the lower organs of governance with greater citizens' participation. And I think that is what really is important. It is where you are bringing in the participation of the citizens. Now, remember that decentralization has to do with change, because when you're decentralizing, you are actually bringing about change. And that is something that is very important. Now, in case of privatization, Zambia privatized during the Second Republic. And a lot of people were so happy because it is something that was done radically. And we were so happy because a country that was unable to have even bathing soap in the shelves, suddenly we had bathing soap on the shelves. We were buying butter from Zimbabwe and a number of other commodities from Zimbabwe. And overnight, we ceased to go to Zimbabwe to buy almost everything from Zimbabwe because the privatization process somehow enabled different organizations or companies to spring up by individuals, and some of them, again, were by the public big sports who ended up buying some of the companies that were owned by the government. So there is privatization, the transfer or partial outright sale. Now, the saddest part of it is some of those companies that were bought off the government and went into the hands of individuals. These individuals, some of these individuals were family members, others were just by people that came together as friends or partners, like a professor indicated, and they had these companies. Some of them had no idea how to run the companies that they bought. The only thing that they were able to do was because they had the money, so they managed to buy the company in question. But then because they had no idea of how to run the company, because change needed to take place right away, the way those companies needed to run was now totally different from the way they were being run under the public service. And I agree with what Professor has indicated, that whether it is in public or whether it is in the private sector, the management processes can be so similar, but there are certain things that tend to change. The employees, for instance, themselves are not the same. You know, yes, some of them would have come together with the company when it was bought, but then certain things needed to be looked into because the culture needed to change. The public sector is known to have a kind of a laissez-faire culture where you can come at whatever time you want, and then you now are a private organization where you do not need to come at your own time, and it's quite strict. If you don't come on time, that time can actually be deducted from your wage. So at the end of it, our privatization has bred corruption, lack of transparency, lack of functioning, whatever, expansion of government into unfair areas. And I can assure you that this has continued. Even now, those that are from Zambia will let you know that the current opposition leader is being accused that he was one of those that mismanaged the privatization process in Zambia. And it's something that has gone on and on in the country, affecting the development of some of these organizations. Decentralization. Remember, I say that it is where you have got decentralization, change needs to be effected. So how fast do we bring about this change? Why change? How much do we change? What do we change? And how effective will that change be? I think these are questions that we need to bear in mind when change is taking place, because you don't change for the sake of changing, because we are saying change is about learning. You do not just say, okay, we're going to change because we need to change. I think we really need to come together and begin to understand, why are we changing? Why are we effecting this change? And what are we going to be changing? And the how process, I think, is very, very important, like Professor was able to indicate. How will you be able to change it? Lewin's theory, I think, explains the disadvantages and the advantages of radical change. In certain cases, radical change can be good. In certain cases, radical change may not be appreciated by the staff. So there are a number of things that need to be looked into as we effect change. Remember, will it bring about effectiveness in the organization or efficiency? So I'm saying benefits of decentralization. I would not be able to say that decentralization has been a bad thing completely, because it has got advantages and disadvantages. And in this case, I'm looking at quick decision-making processes, those that have code for decentralization. I think the quick decision-making processes are really important. There have been people like here in Zambia whose pension, who retired probably, if I may use the retirement age, they would have retired almost about 10 years ago. And up to now, they have not been able to receive their retirement package because people who are supposed to, who knows who and who is a relative. So those who are relatives, remember the thing, those who are relatives tend to end up getting the favors by getting their packages. Then develop leadership skills. That's one of the benefits of decentralization. And it also facilitates growth. It facilitates growth, and there's no two ways about that. And better control, because instead of allowing control to sit at the central point and nobody else can make those decisions, I think if this is relegated or decentralized, I think it helps to have better control and then improved communication. And I heard that communication is something that is very, very important. There's no way we can run away from it. So I am saying that some of the challenges of decentralization is lack of capacity to implement and transform. Do we have the capacity to implement the decentralization process? Because sometimes it's because we are a people that, especially here in Africa, we are a people that like to show face, because there is this international conference and the international the people out there are calling for something probably to do with decentralization. And we think, wow, let's just sign, because then we are also going to be seen as part and parcel, and then we are also going to be given donor funding. And in the process, we end up destroying our own nations. We end up destroying our own organizations. And sometimes, like in the case of private organizations, because a private institution, if, for instance, they do not have a number of organizations in every district or provinces, I don't think it's really necessary for them to decentralize. Why are they decentralizing? Because it's only one organization. What they need to look at are the bureaucracies or the hierarchies in that organization. How are decisions going to be made? And in organization development, we talk about flat structures or high structures and all that. Again, it depends upon a particular organization. So it's not a matter of wanting to decentralize for the sake of decentralizing, even when you know there's no need for decentralization to take place. And then the lack of need or gap identification. Action research is one of those research that has been made mention here. And I think it's important to take a research, do a research and understand if there is any gap, is there a need? Or there could be structural issues to do with corruption. All these can be challenges of decentralization. Resources, do we have the resources to decentralize? Or do we have the resources to bring about the change we want in that particular organizations? Because we may not even have the resources. So we begin this change process and end up without monitoring and evaluation, nothing happens. We find ourselves after probably a whole year, we are right at the very spot where we started, because there were no resources, there was no need at all, and probably clad into corruption, because what we may even have been wanting to see is just to bring in relatives to be employed in an organization when there is literally no need to bring about those changes. One thing that is going on in Zambia is the creation of districts. Even where there is no need to create a district is being created. But what is happening now is that the cadres of the ruling party are now being deployed in all those new districts. And you can see there are no resources. There's literally nothing. In certain cases, there is no structure at all where these people who are sent to these districts can even operate from. But we are very happy that we've got more districts than we had before. Is there a need to have those districts? There is no need. So you see the issue of corruption coming in and clear strategic direction, all because of interests of some people. So the issue of nepotism, I'm sure you can see it, wearing itself through the whole process of change and decentralization. And so we all know the definition of nepotism. I will not go through that, but you see, it has got its root. There's this Latin root. They say nepos, which means the nephew of the owner. So the owner of the business makes preference of who to hire and who not to hire. And I've worked in private organizations where you sit on an interviewing board and you obviously see that the candidate that deserves the job needs to be employed, and all recommendations are made and you submit to the owner of the organization because he's the one that is sitting up there as the vice chancellor as well. And so when that submission has been done, 2 weeks later, you see the very person who did not even perform very well in the interview coming on board as having been employed. And you are wondering what's happening, you know. And this tends to destroy the organization. This tends to destroy, you know, development of such organizations actually doesn't even happen very well. We are now a country that has about, if I'm not mistaken now, we could probably have about 56 private universities, which have sprung just over a short period of time. But if you look at most of these organizations, these new universities and how they are developing, the development process is very, very low because there's this whole ownership thing. And it's something that I like. I'm happy to have a family business because then I know, because I've read about Benz, that the owners, it's a family business. I've learned about the makers of Fiat, that it's a family business. But you see, there is also a difference because we need to have certain processes in place, policies that will be able to guide and will be strictly followed because these policies will guide as to who is employed, who becomes who, you know. And it's the same thing even in government where you see, I've read through, I think during the time that I was preparing this presentation of the history of Zambia and every president and what you can actually see nepotism showing everywhere. We've got a certain stage when one president, almost all his relatives were in the foreign were either ambassadors, people who had no knowledge of what to do wherever they went. But because it is nepotism, it is what we call in one of the languages in Zambia, wako ni wako, which means yours is yours. And yours is supposed to be seen to be operating there. And so what you see is progress which is affected in the country, because even a country can be looked at as an organization. And so I'm asking, over time and across generations, family involvement is perpetuated. And if it is unchecked, I think it can bring about a lot of issues that can destroy the very, very important workers in that particular organization. But you know, when you look at it, is it everything that is bad about nepotism? I don't think so. And I'm sure if you ask questions, you also see that if my daughter is educated and I know she's got the qualifications, I'll be very happy if she joined the company that I'm running, if it is a family business. But then there should be the checks that would have been put in place. Because if we are just employing the family and friends, if we are only promoting the family and friends, if we are only engaging family and friends, then it is going to become so difficult to bring in anybody from outside, because those that are coming from outside will be seen or will be put at par and preferring those that we know are our closest friends, our family members, and those that we know very well. Connections work very well, but sometimes they bring or they breed about a lot of corruption. So is it everything about nepotism that is wrong? And I'm telling you that as Africans, for instance, and I'm sure it could be the same also in Afghanistan, we are a people that are collective. Individualism is something that we don't appreciate so much. So if I've got a 2-bedroom house, I've got a kitchen and I've got a sitting room. If 5 of my relatives come from the village, because we are a collective culture, I need to find them room. There is no way I can tell them, no, you go back. No. And if my uncle calls me and tells me, your brother has just finished or your nephew has just finished grade 12 and he needs a place, because of that collective system that we are a people that are endorsed in that collective system, I will try as much as possible and find a place where my nephew can also come in and begin to gain experience. And so you see that our culture itself needs to be looked at, you know, because that is who we are. Our culture also begins to determine the kind of a people that we are. And as a collective culture, issues to do with nepotism, I don't think there will ever be an end to them. But what we need to do is to look at balances and checks of how we ensure that we do not push out the people that have got the qualifications. We do not push out the people that deserve the particular job or the particular promotion. Those need to come in. The relatives that we need to bring in should also be able to go through the same processes, through the same checks, and should also be able to have the same good qualifications that are needed. Then they can come in. But policies will be able to do a good job, because if our policy says we do not need to employ family, then those policies will be able to be checked. Unfortunately, if the leader himself there can defy the policies, then you know that those policies are not working at all. And so those are some of my questions because of the effects there. The effects of employee engagement, progression routes are going to be affected because of nepotism. Succession plan is also going to be affected because obviously I will be eyeing my son to bring in instead of using the succession plan. Performance levels are also going to be affected. Employee participation will be affected. Staff morale is going to be affected. Relations will be affected. I've worked at one organization where immediately I started working there, I was actually informed by one worker to say, don't say anything when that man, that woman, and that woman are around, because those are relatives of the boss. So if you say anything, 2 or 3 days later, you are fired from there, because those now become people that take information to the leader. And some of the information that goes to the leader may not even be credible information that even needs to be discussed. So has it got its own benefits? I think it is up to you to decide whether nepotism has got its own benefit. If it is destroying the organization, I think it's important because we're talking about organization development here. I wanted to look at I think some of the things I've already discussed under Zambia there, the public and the private sector. The universities, I think I've given a number of examples in universities in Zambia and what is going on. Some of the universities have even taken themselves to courts because of some of the issues that are going on. And in the process, what happens is that these organizations are not developing. You are expecting improvement, and the university sector that now has grown from the previous only 2 public universities in the country. At least the coming in of these private universities has improved the qualifications of a number of people. But because of the wrangles that are going on as a result of nepotism, as a result of failing to bring about change, you find that these organizations remain the same. Even the ones that probably may start at 2 years will be doing far much better than the ones that would have started years ago. And in the process, what we have ended up having is the majority of the universities that are now coming to the country are those that are being run by foreigners. And I think that is something that is really sad. So organization development, in light of the changes that we've talked about and issues to do with the nepotism, the leader is very important. One of my publications is looking at the followers are not supposed to be considered as zombies. The leader is not the only person in the organization. The leader is because of the followers. The followers make the leader. So the leader has got a role to play to ensure that those that are following are in line, they know what is happening. Yes, leadership has to do with influencing those that are being led, and that is very important. So authentic leadership, I think, is crucial to organization development. Authentic leadership is crucial to change that goes on in an organization. The character of the leader is also crucial. What is happening in America at the moment, I think, speaks about the character of a leader that begins to destroy what has been built for so many years. In 1 minute, the character of an individual can destroy everything. And so leaders in organizations need to stand. Even if, for instance, like the example I gave at the beginning of this head teacher who decided to fight the teacher because of what he was saying, I think that speaks about character. You know, yes, the teacher might have been wrong in whatever he was saying, but you know, certain times we go through difficulties. Those difficulties test our character as leaders. You know, so leadership against versus nepotism, character of a leader will actually help the role of the policy that is in place when it comes to employing relatives. Ethics, I think in organization development, ethics are very, very important. And when we have got ethics in place, these are moral obligations. You know, this is, even in our culture, we have our own moral standards. And when we get rid of those moral standards, then we know we have a culture that has broken down. The moral fiber or fabric of that culture would have broken down. And it is the same in organizations. Leaders that are not authentic, whose character is flawed, they have no ethics at all. And so whatever they do is as it comes, and they destroy the whole organization. And so I believe that change will only be possible if leaders are authentic, whose characters are standing, and they are actually adhering to ethical obligations. And so it's very important. Standards are good because, yes, sometimes you may not treat everybody in the same way, but I think the ethics will be able to guide us on how we should be able to treat the staff in the organization. This is just the example I said I will give you, what Zambia has gone through. You can imagine from 1992 to 2015, that's when we had the concept stage. We're looking at policy and legislation. 2015, devolution, institutional reform, redesign, councils and sub-districts. 2015 to 2017, the devolution and implementation there. 2016 to 2017, fiscal decentralization. And I can assure you, up to now, we are still talking about decentralization in Zambia. The implementation process has been something that has been difficult. So there we are. Now, one of the things that I wanted to also make mention here is that, you know, benchmarking is very, very important. And I'm sure that is why even here where we are a people from different countries. There are people from Kenya, there are people from Nigeria, people from Uganda, other countries I may not be able to mention. And probably what we are learning is things that we can look at and see how best we can be able to implement in our organization. But like it was indicated, I think we still need to put certain measures in place. The culture of that particular country needs to be considered. It's not a matter of implanting what has been molded in a foreign mode for the sake of, but we need to look at the culture that is in that particular organization. Yes, we've got the culture of the country and also the culture of the organization. The people that are in that organization need to be considered. That is important. Then we also need to look at the policies that are in place, the resources that are in place. What kind of structures do you have in place? What about the competencies of the leaders? These change agents that we are depending upon, what competencies do they have so that when we bring about these changes, they'll be able to help and facilitate and speak about the change that we are talking about. Then we also need to look at how keen and flexible these leaders also are, or the managers. And then we also need to look at the some issues that can be generic and can also be adopted by different organizations, no matter where you are. There are some that are quite generic. There are certain processes, books that have been written. The majority of the books that we refer to, even in organization development, when we teach it, you find that almost all the books that we are using, almost all the books that I have in the library, in our university, they are all from the West. Very few people have written. And so you can see how generic even organization development is. But we need to be careful that even as we learn from what our friends in the West have done in terms of organization development, what are we doing ourselves in our own organization? And that is where critical thinking, innovation comes about, so that what we have learned becomes a foundation upon which we begin to build what works for our organization. What works for our organization will be something that others will be able to learn from. And their learning from that may not be in totality, but there will be certain ideas that will be able to be picked. Already, as Professor was speaking, somebody was able to say, I like the system thinking. Because yes, it has got important elements, because if the system is not thinking, the system is dormant, the system is just coming about as a tough system, it can actually destroy the whole organization. So we really need to be careful how we adopt each and every issue that we've been able to bring about here. Look at yourselves and what really can work for Afghanistan, for instance. And especially for the students, I think this is very important. I like the different case studies which have been given. And that is something that is very good. Case studies are good because they make the students to think. But even as they are thinking, I think there's more critical analysis that needs to be done so that we've got something, and even a book can be written out of these case studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christine. I believe you pinpointed realities, most of them, and the real obstacles which fails the change. And if I want to connect the first part of your presentation, the concept of dormant spores. As I was working in banking sector, we have dormant account. Dormant accounts are those accounts which are having no transaction for a long period. So if we can connect this first part of the presentation to the last part of the presentation, the dormant concept with the nepotism. So we will be finding the dormant leaders who are putting the problem and obstacles in front of the change and transformation. So unfortunately, we will have dormant managers and dormant leaders in both private and public sector today.
Yeah.
And of course, the decentralization, and we need to have the feasibility and checkpoints whether the change that we are bringing are feasible or not feasible, and the monitoring and evaluation. Unfortunately, we start the change from a point and we reach a certain situation that the change has been collapsed and there is nothing to be done within it. You had an insightful presentation, and I thank you for that. We have certain questions posed here in the chat box. Miss Tizzy asked if is it possible to bring everybody on board? Maybe it's about if we have all the organization, can we have the ability to have everybody in the same platform to think the same, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I think Tsitsi is on the mic. She can clarify the question there. Tsitsi.
Thank you, Doc, and good day to everyone. I think, yeah, that's how the question, the way he has put it, that's what I'm asking, because at one point, Dr. Christine said, it's important for you to draw everybody, even if when you leave one person, that person may actually cause a whole lot of problem. So my question is, practically, is it really possible to bring everybody on board to say this is the change that we want to effect in the organization, and you come to that point where everybody is within that boat and you're driving together? And so in most cases, because practically in most cases, I found that there's always that one person or that one group or that one department that kind of resist everything. And the more you try to rope them in, the more you're losing time. And there'll always just be some resistance. So I found that at the end of the day, that's when maybe leaders just decide to move and say, we just move even without this. So that's the question to Dr. Christine, is it possible? And if there is continuously that group or department or a person who is resistant, how do you deal with that?
Can I go ahead and answer that?
Yes.
You okay with answering, or you can have another question?
No. I think the best thing would be for me to answer it.
Okay.
It's a very good question. Very, very good. Practically, it is not possible to have everybody on board. I think there's what we are calling management of change. That is what is really, really important, because if you are going to move and then you still wait on this person to come on board, then you will not move very far away. No, because that person will keep drawing you, will keep drawing you. But I think the most important is where a leader manages the change. Even that very one person, even that same group, there must be a way of managing them, because what we don't want is them to destroy everybody else that is on board. So I think it is about the leader and how that leader will be able to manage the whole process of change, will be able to manage those that are not on board. Because here is a ship, okay? Here is a ship. So if, for instance, I'm in the ship and the ship needs to take off, and I've got these guys who are saying they're not going to manage to jump on the ship because they don't trust my leadership skills, they don't trust the changes that we want to implement, they don't trust even where we are heading to, but they are part and parcel of my own people. They are my followers. So I think in managing, there must be a way in which we should be able to bring them on board. They may not completely agree, but they can actually jump into the ship. Some of them, we just have to tie them to the ship. As the ship is going, they are actually coming along with us, because if we don't want to leave them, but then there are others that probably we might be able to say, okay, I think we need to let them go, because it's not everybody that is with us that needs to come with us. And sometimes that is the mistake that we make. I normally say that when I've been asked to preach in church, where the leaders are asking, there are people that are so difficult to move along with. And when they're about to leave the church, we are like holding on to them. No, you cannot leave the church. You cannot leave the church. Probably they don't belong there. They are just a distraction and they can easily destroy the whole church. And it's the same with leadership. That is why managing change may also mean letting go some of those that may not be able to move on with us. But then, in management, especially in human resource management, we know that what we have employed is not just the individual. It is their skills, it is their attributes, it is, those are the things that we have employed. So if we know that they've got the skills, they've got the attributes that we can actually use in that organization, we still want them to be able to bring those skills on board. If we want them to come, it is up to the leader. But in management, you need to be very careful, because you might end up bringing somebody on board that might completely destroy everybody. So it's all about management of change. It's crucial for that particular leader. Yes, Professor, I can see your hand. You are muted.
No, I just moved my hand. I didn't mean anything. I'm sorry.
Okay, I have my hand up.
Yes, please. Yes, please.
Yes, thank you very much. So first one is a question and maybe a comment later on. So, okay. But if you are in an organization,
sorry, I can't hear. Sorry, Doc. I think someone is talking in the background. I can't hear.
Okay, can I go on?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you very much. So for me, what is worrisome is that initially, yes, my comment would be, I always also advise people, when you start something good and you know that it is good, you don't expect that everybody will join in, because some people are slow, some ask lots of questions, some just jump on board and start moving with you. That's fine. But if we are in an organization again, there's something that is also worrisome, that what do you do then with those people they remain in the organization. You start something, and when you are moving on and they are seeing that the thing now is being successful, some may join you, but others may even try to throw more and more spanners so that it does not become a success. And this is where it becomes a problem for the organization. And I find that in most cases, people are also not bold enough to take certain decisions to make sure that somehow this issue is resolved. And so it's something that I would want us to concentrate on because it really disturbs the organization and it can destabilize the organization, or because speaker after speaker already, it has been said that these people, the individuals who remain behind, are there sometimes even to cause problems.
Thank you very much, Doc, for that.
Doc,
you wanted to say something?
I just want to, a revelation that came when Dr. Violet was speaking, to say sometimes now the bigger challenge is that the change agent is not the leader. So there is a limit to which, upon what action they can actually make to those people who are resisting. Because like, if we look at the cases that we've been given, these are consultant kind of people who are bringing the change in the organization. They are not the leaders, so they don't really have the capacity to either to check out these people or do anything. So I just wanted to add that aspect so that as you respond, you also, just allude to that fact.
Thank you very much. I'll go with, I'll start with Dr. Violet. A human being is a very complex person, very, very complex person, and very, very difficult. I've moved from organization to organization. I remember the first time that I went to teach in China, one of the things I was taught was that you may not be accepted to teach there. So what you need to do is make sure that you emphasize on the qualifications that you have so that they can see that you've got the qualifications. You are not just there. And it became so difficult. I remember the first class, I told them the qualifications that I had, and they were able to see that I was qualified enough to teach that organization development class. But halfway through the class, I noticed that all my students were on their gadgets. And that was around about 2007. But you can imagine that every student was either on a laptop, and they had 3 gadgets: the laptop, the phone, and the iPad. And I began to find ways of how I can bring the students, because then I knew that I was going to be 3 weeks in China at this university and may not be able to achieve anything. And it became so difficult, and it was not easy to bring about a few of the students to understand that they needed to learn and not to depend on what the gadgets were actually saying. So we managed, but some of them, they ended up failing the program because they didn't come on board. And that is an example that I can give. Some organizations, like recently when I joined UNICAF University, and I know it was not anything, it hasn't been anything that is easy. I only had one group that came to my office, I think after about 3 weeks, and said, "Doc, we are behind you and we are going to work with you." But that same group that came and said, "We are behind you," a few of them started coming to my office and became bearers of how this one is, what this one is saying, what this one is saying, and what this one is saying. So you can see that, it is difficult to manage human beings. And that is why we say management, human resource management, because the human beings need to be managed. But I think key is the leader. How are you managing them? Because in managing them, you can also destroy them completely. So it's something that is a skill that needs to be implemented. And I agree with Dr. Makuku. Some of the people that might even be showing you that they are on board, they are in total agreement, might not be in total agreement at all. They might be just there as a seed that begins to destroy even those that would have actually come on board. So I don't know how much I can explain on that, because I think the key really is in the leader and how the leader begins to know and understand the people that the leader is leading. How do you bring them on board? I like the process that Lewin describes, because when you're talking about the unfreezing point, this is where you begin to help the members of staff to begin to understand what really is going on, because the whole process of change needs to be understood. Did you go through that process where people understand what is going on? Because a number of times we are too radical, you know. I remember giving an example to my class. I walked in with a frozen chicken and I dropped it on the floor with so much strength and it just scattered everywhere in its frozen state. And everybody was surprised. What's going on? And I said, you know, sometimes that's what change does. That's what we do. And in the way of that radical process, you have the thigh going under the table, the wing going outside through the door. You know, sometimes that's what happens. All the staff are destroyed because of the radical process of change. So it is at that unfreezing point where you are saying you're going to bring in change. How well have you explained to everybody to understand? Yes, there'll be those that may not completely understand. But again, it is your role as a leader. I'll not be able to give you the, yes, this is how it should be done, but it will be your role as a leader to see how well you can actually manage that process of change. Those that need to go will need to go, because remember, Doc, there's the issue of quality as well. There must be quality in the change that is taking place. And then, yes, thank you very much for bringing the element of the change agents, because the change agents, we could have separate change agents, but when I look at the change agents, I don't know how Professor will be able to explain that, but I look at almost everybody in that organization to be a change agent. That's why they all need to come on board. What is your mind? Because as a leader, you are the influencer. You are the one that has a vision. Have they understood your vision? Have they understood the goals? Do they know where you are actually heading to? Because if it is in the bus and you get all of them in the bus, some of them will jump out of the bus and kill themselves. So as leaders, I think we are so crucial here, where we don't treat them as zombies. We simply, you know, pass our wand over them and we expect them to begin to move and to begin to act because we have told them to begin to act. There is a way in which we need to manage the whole process of change. And sometimes too much management can also destroy the whole process of change management.
So in certain times, I believe that we should stop managing and start leading them. Another question that I see is about the nepotism in government organization, and it asks how we can check the nepotism in government organizations.
Yeah, that is very sad. Yesterday, I was listening to a video by a South African, and she was actually saying, it's very good that now we have the vaccine, but I'm actually saying that because every time the leaders are the first, so can please the leaders be the first ones, and can it go through the hierarchy, because we are people that respect the older people. So the older people in government should be the first one to receive the vaccine, then followed by these, they should also receive the vaccine, and then it should be followed up by those that get big tenders. They should be the next one on the line, and then those their connections as well. So if you receive good tenders, then you should also be able to look at your connections, let them come in, connect them and say, oh, that's my connection, bring them in and get the tenders, you know, and all that. And I liked it, because then at the end she says, we are always last, so why should we be the first? Why should we be favored now that there's a vaccine? Let those who are always first be the first ones to get the vaccination. And so if they don't die, then we know that the vaccine is okay. Now, I think the public sector is the one that where I don't think, how should I put it? Maybe let me give you an example. When the second Republican president in Zambia came on board, one of the things that he was so disappointed about was that at a national milling company, 10 managers were managing one bag of milling meal. Now, one bag of mealie meal is a 50 kg bag of maize meal because our staple food is maize. So we make pulp. I think those from Zimbabwe call it sadza, Kenya, they call it ugali. So that is our staple food. Almost everybody in Zambia eats that. But can you imagine a national meeting? 10 managers were managing one bag. According to his calculation, statistics are important, data is important. So when that data was collected and we were made to know that, imagine 10 managers managing one bag of mealie meal. So what happened there was that 9 of those managers had to be fired because they were irrelevant. But when you go ahead and analyze who were these managers, they were all relatives of the top management. And that was in a public sector. So nepotism is something that ends up destroying an organization, and how well it is done, I think, is very, very important. Now, can we get rid of it completely? That's why I said, as a collective society, it is something that will take, I don't know, to sort of like remove it completely. We may not completely remove it, but I think it is the type of policies that we bring in place. But in the public sector, they are culprits. And like Dave had indicated, Professor had indicated, what happens in the private sector also happens in the public sector. Even in the private sector, that is common, you know, where you find that everybody that is running a particular department might just be a child of the vice chancellor, who is the owner of the organization, for instance. And the same happens in a number of other organizations. Some organizations are running okay, even with nepotism going on, but it's what it does to those others who are not part and parcel of the family ring. So I think these are things that we really need to look at very, very carefully, whether we can eliminate it completely or whether we just need to put policies in place which should be followed, policies which should be able to bring about checks and balances and ensure that we employ the right people, whether it is a relative or whether it be somebody who is not related completely. But it is something that is very, very difficult.
Thank you, Doc. I see interesting stuff in the chat box as someone desires to be your mentee. I'm flying to come closer to you, learning. And we have an interesting question. It says that the concept of dormant staff disease is a complex situation because it exists everywhere, such as family, like a dormant husband, dormant wife, and children. How can we manage them? Now we will mix this, but as I see another question in an organization where the leader is a dormant, how can one deal with this situation? While you were explaining the dormant concept, I remember the FLIPS model in performance appraisal, that it differs the employees in accordance to their potential and performance. And I believe that these dormants are the low potential and low performance, which are mostly the question marks. But what about the leaders? How we can deal with the leaders who are dormant?
Thank you. Can I hold you there, Dr. Christine?
Yes, please.
So that we be conscious of time.
Yes,
I will
please.
ask Mr. Syed Kashifi, your hand was up. I will ask you to make a comment, and also Mr. Hassan, because the issues that were discussed are relevant to what you are doing. Professor Chijoke, I hope he's still here. Prof. Chijoke to also make a comment, and then we go to Dr. Christine and Professor Jamieson, and then we will close. I will ask Madam Maureen to close the session for us. Let's start with Mr. Kashifi.
Yes, Doctor. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Christine, for your interesting presentation. I have comment plus questions. You discussed very interesting topics like decentralization, devolution, federation, nepotism. These are the realities of our country, Afghanistan, because our country has been a victim of nepotism for a long time. And regarding my question, in one of your slides, you discussed the challenges of decentralization. There was one issue which challenges decentralization was the participation of civil society. I really did not know that how participation of civil society can challenge the decentralization, one question. The other is that whether the commitment, lack of commitment of the leadership of a government can cause, I mean, lack of decentralization or not. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Prof. Chijoke.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Christie,
Thank you very
for
much.
the very mind-blowing presentation. Yeah, I want to comment on the issue of when making change. But from what the examples you gave about where you worked in the private sector, where documents were destroyed because they want to keep a clean table. Clean table policy is good. I think it enables it makes one not to be distracted from what we are supposed to do and then what are supposed to achieve. However, when implementing change, you don't jettison or stop or the old process or what we have been doing before. That's what we call parallel implementation of change. You need to put both. You need to run both about the new change you are introducing and also the old one, pending when you are sure that the change you are implementing is successful or will be successful. Why I say this is that the university ought not to have destroyed those papers. They're supposed to keep them, and while also trying to implement the new change.
Yeah.
So change is not what should be done at once, why jettisoning the old practice. So there must be parallel implementation of change until we are sure that the change we are implementing is fine and is successful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Very much.
Funbi.
So sorry, was I raising my hand? Doctor?
No. I just need you to make a comment as we try to wrap up. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. For me, I don't know how to express my excitement listening to Dr. Christine today. I had a lot of network issues when the prof was speaking, so I was in and out. The slide will help me a lot. But this is an exceptional presentation, and I'm still trying to digest it. Quite honestly, it's just too. How do I put it? I can't believe that this is for free. That's the way I feel right now. And I mean, all I want to say is just to say thank you. I mean, that's the best I can say. Thank you so much for this opportunity. That's what I can say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I will ask Dr. Prof to share his remarks as I put Mr. Hassan's question in the chat box. Prof. Jamieson.
I'm sorry, was there a specific question you wanted me to answer or just close out?
Just a close out and your comment on the discussion.
Okay. I love listening to Dr. Christine again because she brings very valuable thinking and sometimes a different perspective than we're used to in terms of thinking about what goes on in organizations and how it affects what we try to do and change. So I appreciated that. And the main thing for me is I like your questions and I love that you're all studying the field and I wish you the best as you go forward in taking OD to new heights in other parts of the world. I really appreciate that. Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Dr. Christine.
Thank you very much. What do you do when you have got a dormant leader? One time I did a consultancy at a college in one of the districts, and there were a number of operational problems that emerged after the whole research and all that. And after looking at what really was the problem, it emerged that the problem was the leader. The one who occupied the biggest office. It is a college. And so the principal, you are expecting that the principal should have even been in that office. The one who was occupying that office was just one of the major shareholders who had moved from his office and went to work from the college. And that made life difficult for the principal to implement anything because he was in total disagreement with whatever was agreed upon. And one principle that I've learned in consultancy is shake the indolent leader. Statistics do a very good job. Statistics, when you show statistics and you're able to say, this is what is happening. And we told him, if you continue working from this office, what you are going to see is the end of this college. It is going to die. And the reason why it's going to die is because of you operating from this college. And so that college is still there because he ended up moving, because we told him, next time we are coming, we don't want to find you operating from there. Let the principal operate from the college. So like Professor indicated, statistics are very good because then they can actually shake this indolent leader. Dormant leaders are a liability. If a leader is dormant, they know that even the followers are going to be dormant. We give birth to ourselves. Having been a leader in different universities, I have noticed the type of a leader that I was in one university is not the same type of a leader that I am in this new university, because you find different people altogether. But if you are dormant, in certain cases, if you are dormant, what will begin to happen is those that are real leaders and are your followers will emerge and will begin leading, and you will remain there dormant yourself. And if those that begin to see it, they begin to think that that is anarchy that is being created. But I think the leader needs to think, to look back at himself and see what is he doing in that organization. A leader is supposed to lead, but if a leader is dormant, then that is one reason why we have got a number of organizations that are not developing because of dormant leaders. Yes, they are dormant husbands, they are dormant wives, they are dormant. It can go through a number of systems, but we need to wake such kind of dormancy up. When I was reading through it, I was thinking, what needs to be done to bring out the best out of people that are dormant? One of the things that you can see, because the reason why the bacteria goes into dormancy is because of the environment. And I'm seeing it, for instance, like some of the organizations we have in Zambia, like the universities that we have in Zambia, which have got a central or the federal outside the country. It becomes so difficult because right here in Zambia, we cannot make any decision. One good example is where we have staff that have tested positive. As a leader, you can't make a decision and say, all right, yes, what is required according to the healthy protocols and according to what Zambia says is that these people that have tested positive, the university needs to close and all that. You can't make that decision because you are waiting for the central decision makers to make the decision, which becomes very difficult because you are dealing with the life of people. You see, so we need to be very careful with dormant leaders because then they begin to destroy the whole organization. The lack of commitment, challenges of the civil society. I'll give you one example. I belong to an organization called CAMFED, which is the Campaign for Female Education. The Campaign for Female Education has got a policy which we call re-entry policy. The re-entry policy is a policy which encourages girls that get pregnant to continue with their education. I'm one of the advisors in that NGO. Now, the complaint that has come, I did a research, the complaint that came out as to why this policy has not been effective, and over years, this policy is still something that we are fighting for is because the civil society were not engaged. And because they were not brought in to understand, to appreciate the change that a pregnant girl can be allowed to still go back to school, be given maternity leave. After she gives birth, she can still go back to school, finish her school, and continue with her life instead of bringing her life to a standstill because of that particular pregnancy. So the civil society have emerged and have said, because we were not involved, so we are not going to take part into this policy. So the faith schools, if a girl gets pregnant in a faith-based school, they'll suspend the girl. When she comes back, she's not supposed to continue at that faith-based school. She's supposed to go to a public school because as far as they're concerned, they're not part and parcel of that particular policy. So you can see that change, even the civil society are supposed to be informed because they are stakeholders. Stakeholders are also supposed to know what is going on when change is taking place in particular organizations. We cannot leave them out. They are quite crucial. So commitment, yes, commitment is important, like it was commented by the submitter. Yes,
thank you, Dr. Christine.
Yes.
I understand we have a lot to discuss in this particular topic. I hope we'll be able to have another session to tackle all the many issues that are there. I will ask Mr. Faisal Bariyaly to say his last closing remarks, then hand over to Madam Maureen to close today's session. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Mr. Faisal.
I would like to thank everyone, starting from Dr. Justin to everyone participated in this amazing program, for this amazing opportunity provided for us. We really enjoy learning through this platform. It is really amazing, and we thank you from our own heart. And I have nothing else to say but to thank everyone here. I will hand over to Dr. Morin for closing this session. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Wow. It has been so wonderful. And I just want to say that OD is the field that has come to transform the world, our communities, with domicile to operate as human beings. Just take a look at what we have discussed this evening. Is there any area of our life that we cannot say we want to deploy what we have learned today? So what we give in organization development is invaluable. And I would like us to say that the opportunity that is being provided by this network is something that we all have to appreciate, and we all have to sell the stories out there wherever we are. We should let people know the kind of contents that they can get being part of this network. And I say a special thank you. I will always say that to Dr. Justin, Dr. Jegede, the entire leadership of OLDN, because what you are given is much more than what anybody can get, even within 4 walls of certain institutions across the world. So it's so much that we are taking from this network. Thank you very much, Professor Jamieson. Thank you very much, Dr. Christine. I want to say this should not be the last time we are having this conversation. There is so much more, just like Dr. Justin mentioned, that we can learn. In these 2 topics, there is so much more, and I would really appreciate it if just both of you can give us another time in months ahead. If weeks ahead is not going to be possible. So I thank everybody that's made it to attend this session, and I want to tell us to go out there and spread the message and actually be the change that we want to see in our society. Thank you, everyone, and see you soon.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. See you on the 29th for our next edition. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. That was a wonderful session. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.